Marcus Chen wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stared at the massive alien structure before him. The Kepler station floated in the void like a twisted metal flower, its biomechanical petals slowly rotating around a central core that pulsed with sickly green light. After 3 months of hyperspace travel, he had finally reached the most remote outpost in known space. The briefing had been simple enough. The Zephyrian Collective had lost contact with their research station 6 weeks ago. Standard protocol required a neutral party to investigate, and humans had built a reputation as the galaxy's best troubleshooters. Marcus had volunteered immediately when he saw the pay rate, enough to buy his own ship and finally escape the corporate grind. Now, floating in his maintenance pod just 100 meters from the station's docking bay, Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold vacuum of space. The station looked wrong somehow. The usual soft blue glow of Zephyrian technology had been replaced by that unsettling green light, and the biomechanical walls seemed to pulse with an irregular rhythm. Like a diseased heartbeat, his comm crackled to life. Maintenance Pod 77 Alpha, this is Transit Control. You are cleared for docking at Bay 12. Be advised. We're reading some unusual energy signatures from the station. Recommend extreme caution. Marcus toggled his response. Copy that, Control. Beginning approach now. He paused, then added, Any word on what might have happened to the Zephyrian crew? Static filled the channel for several seconds before the controller's voice returned, noticeably more tense. -77 Alpha. That's what you're there to find out. Good luck. The docking procedure went smoothly enough, though Marcus noticed that the station's automated systems seemed sluggish in their responses. As his pod settled into the docking clamps with a metallic clang that echoed through the hull, he ran through his final equipment check. Emergency beacon, atmospheric scanner, plasma cutter, medical kit, and his grandfather's lucky wrench, the one tool that had never failed him in 15 years of maintenance work. The airlock cycled with a series of wet, organic sounds that made Marcus's skin crawl. Zephyrian technology was always partially biological, but this sounded different, diseased. When the inner door finally opened, he was hit with a wave of humid air that reeked of copper and ozone. The corridor beyond was a nightmare. What should have been smooth pearl-white walls covered in gentle bioluminescent patterns had become a twisted maze of dark, vine-like growths. The green light pulsed from within these growths, casting shifting shadows that made Marcus feel like he was standing inside some massive, infected organ. His atmospheric scanner beeped softly. The air was breathable if unpleasant. Marcus activated his headlamp and stepped carefully into the corridor. His boots squelched slightly on what should have been a solid floor but now felt spongy and organic beneath his feet. What the hell happened here? He muttered, raising his plasma cutter instinctively as something wet dripped from the ceiling onto his shoulder. The station's layout was completely different from the blueprints he had studied. Corridors branched off in directions that shouldn't have been possible, and the walls themselves seemed to shift and breathe in his peripheral vision. When he tried to access the main computer terminal near the docking bay, the screen flickered with symbols he didn't recognize, definitely not Zephyrian script. As Marcus made his way deeper into the station, he began to notice the bodies. The first was a Zephyrian engineer, or what was left of one. The being's elongated skull and forearms were intact, but dark growths had erupted from its chest cavity, spreading across the floor like a cancer. The corpse's eyes had been replaced by clusters of the same green lights that now illuminated the station. More bodies followed, each one more grotesquely transformed than the last. Some had been partially absorbed into the walls themselves, their faces frozen in expressions of terror and pain. Others had been completely consumed, leaving only vague humanoid shapes in the organic matter that now covered every surface. Marcus's hands shook as he documented everything with his helmet camera. Whatever had happened here, it wasn't a simple system failure or pirate attack. This was something else entirely, something that transformed living beings into part of itself. His scanner detected movement ahead. Marcus froze, plasma cutter raised as a figure stumbled into the corridor. It had once been Zephyrian, but now its body was a patchwork of flesh and the dark vine-like growths, its transformed eyes fixed on Marcus with an intelligence that was both alien and hungry. "Stay back," Marcus shouted, though he doubted the thing could understand him. The creature tilted its head, studying him with predatory interest. then opened its mouth to reveal rows of crystalline teeth that glowed with the same green light as everything else in this nightmare station. When it spoke, the voice was a harmony of different tones, as if multiple beings were speaking through the same throat. "Human," it said in perfect standard, "we have been waiting for you." Marcus stumbled backward, his plasma cutter humming with deadly energy as the transformed Zephyrian approached. The creature moved with jerky, unnatural movements as if something else was learning to operate its body. Behind it, Marcus could hear more sounds, wet sliding noises and the scrape of claws against metal. "What are you?" Marcus demanded, his voice steadier than he felt. "What happened to this station?" The creature's head tilted further, nearly rotating a full 90 degrees in a way that would have snapped a normal spine. "We are what becomes. We are what grows when old limitations are shed." Its voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate in Marcus's bones. "The Zephyrians called us many names before they joined us. Parasite, infection, abomination." More figures emerged from the organic growths that lined the corridor. Each one had once been crew of the station, Zephyrians, a few Centauri traders, even what looked like a hive collective drone. All of them had been transformed, their bodies serving as hosts for the spreading green corruption. "We prefer to think of ourselves as evolution," the first creature continued, taking another step forward. "The next stage of biological development. Your species interests us greatly, human. So much potential, so much rage and determination hiding behind such fragile flesh." Marcus fired a warning shot that scorched the wall beside the creature's head. The transformed being didn't even flinch. Instead, it smiled with its crystalline teeth. And Marcus noticed that the burned wall was already beginning to heal, new growth spreading across the damaged surface. "Your weapons cannot truly harm us here," it said. "This entire station is our body now. But please resist. We learned so much from resistance." Marcus turned and ran. The station had become a maze of twisted corridors and impossible architecture. What should have been straight passages now curved and branched like arteries. The ceiling had grown lower in places, forcing Marcus to duck beneath hanging tendrils that reached for him with obvious intent. His helmet light carved through the green-tinged darkness, revealing horrors at every turn. Behind him, he could hear the pursuit. Not just the creature he had encountered, but others as well. Their movements were becoming more coordinated, more natural, as if whatever controlled them was rapidly learning how to use their stolen bodies effectively. Marcus ducked into what his scanner indicated was a maintenance shaft. The opening was barely large enough for his bulky environmental suit, but it led upward toward what the station blueprints showed as the main reactor level. If he could reach the reactor, maybe he could find answers, or at least a way to destroy this infection before it spread beyond the station. The shaft was a nightmare of cramped spaces and grasping tendrils. More than once, Marcus had to use his plasma cutter to clear away growths that blocked his path. Each time he did, he could swear he heard something like a scream echoing through the station's twisted infrastructure. When he finally emerged onto the reactor level, Marcus found himself in what had once been the station's central command center. Banks of Zephyrian biocomputers lined the walls, but they had been transformed into something else entirely. The organic screens pulsed with information in that same alien script he had seen before, and cables of living tissue connected everything in a web of neural pathways. At the center of it all sat a figure that made Marcus's blood run cold. It had once been the station commander, a Zephyrian female named Silthera, according to the personnel files Marcus had studied. But she had been transformed beyond recognition. Her body had become a fusion of flesh and machine, plugged directly into the station systems through dozens of living cables that emerged from her spine and skull. When she spoke, her voice was the source of all the harmonics Marcus had been hearing. "Welcome, Marcus Chen. We have been studying your species files since we detected your approach. Fascinating creatures, humans. Such capacity for adaptation under pressure. What are you?" Marcus repeated, keeping his weapon trained on the transformed commander. "Some kind of hive mind?" Silthera's transformed features shifted into what might have been a smile. "We are so much more than that. We are the convergence, the end result of a billion-year evolutionary process that your limited science cannot yet comprehend. We began as a simple organism on a dead world, but we learned to incorporate the strengths of everything we consumed." She gestured with arms that had been extended with additional joints and chitinous plating. "The Zephyrians gave us their biotechnology and their telepathic abilities. The Centauri provided their merchant knowledge and trade networks. The hive drone contributed its collective processing power. Each species makes us more than we were. Marcus's scanner was picking up massive energy readings from the reactor core. Whatever the convergence had done to the station, it was drawing power at levels that should have been impossible. And now you want humans too. Your species offers something unique, Silthera admitted. Your stubborn refusal to accept limitations. Your ability to find solutions where others see only impossibility. Your talent for destroying what cannot be fixed and rebuilding it better. Her multiple eyes focused on Marcus with predatory intensity. We have plans for humanity, Marcus Chen. Great plans. The sound of approaching footsteps echoed from the corridor behind him. Marcus's time was running out, but he had learned something crucial. The convergence wasn't just a random infection. It was intelligent, purposeful, and it had been specifically studying humanity. That meant this encounter wasn't an accident. You called us here, he realized. The station didn't just lose contact. You made it go dark to lure someone in. Silthera's smile widened, revealing teeth that had been replaced with what looked like crystalline data storage nodes. The Zephyrian Collective was becoming suspicious of our long silences. We needed fresh genetic material to study, and humans have such a reputation for solving impossible problems. You were inevitable. Marcus glanced at his scanner readings again. The reactor core was building toward some kind of massive energy discharge. Whatever the convergence was planning, it was about to reach a critical phase. He had minutes, maybe less, before something irreversible happened. Marcus studied the reactor readings on his scanner, his engineer's mind automatically analyzing the impossible energy patterns. The convergence had somehow turned the entire station into a massive biological transmitter, and the power levels were building towards something that would make a supernova look like a candle flame. You're not just planning to spread to other ships, he said, the horrific realization hitting him. You're going to broadcast yourself. Send your genetic pattern across subspace to every inhabited system in the galaxy. Silthera's transformed features showed something like approval. Now you begin to understand. The convergence cannot be stopped by quarantine or military action. In 17 minutes, every world in the Galactic Union will receive our gift. Every species will have the opportunity to evolve beyond their current limitations. The approaching footsteps had stopped just outside the command center. Marcus could see shapes moving in the corridor, but they weren't advancing. They were waiting, letting their leader handle the conversation. The convergence was confident in its victory. The beautiful irony, Silthera continued, is that humanity's own communication networks will be our delivery system. Your quantum entanglement relays, your hyperspace beacons, even your primitive radio telescopes, all will carry our signal to every corner of inhabited space simultaneously. Marcus's hand tightened on his plasma cutter. 17 minutes wasn't enough time to evacuate billions of people, even if he could somehow get a warning out. But maybe there was another way. He had spent 15 years fixing things that weren't supposed to be fixable, solving problems that other engineers said were impossible. There's just one problem with your plan, Marcus said, slowly moving closer to the central console. You're using technology you don't fully understand. Silthera's multiple eyes tracked his movement. Explain. Zephyrian biotech is designed with built-in safety limits. Organic systems can't handle infinite power increases without burning out. Marcus gestured at the readings on his scanner. You've pushed this reactor past its theoretical maximum. In about 15 minutes, it's going to undergo catastrophic failure. For the first time, uncertainty flickered across the transformed commander's features. Our calculations show the system is stable. Your calculations are based on the original Zephyrian programming, Marcus replied. But you've changed the fundamental nature of the system. You've turned a carefully balanced biomechanical reactor into something it was never designed to be. He pointed at specific energy spikes on his scanner. See these fluctuations? Those are cascade failures building up in the organic components. The living tissue can't handle the power load. Silthera's expression shifted to something like concern. She began interfacing directly with the station systems through her neural connections, information flowing through the living cables that connected her to the central computers. Marcus could see the exact moment when she realized he was right. The organic matrix is becoming unstable, she admitted, but we can compensate. Reroute power through secondary systems, reduce the transmission strength. Not with 17 minutes left, Marcus said confidently. The cascade failure has already begun. It's a mathematical certainty now. In 14 minutes, this reactor is going to go critical, and when it does, it'll take out everything within a light-year radius. The other convergence entities had begun filtering into the command center, their transformed faces showing the first real emotion Marcus had seen from them: fear. They were a hive mind, but they weren't suicidal. The prospect of total annihilation was something even their alien intelligence couldn't accept. However, Marcus continued, I might be able to fix it. 15 years of maintenance work teaches you how to jury-rig solutions for impossible problems. Silthera studied him with her multiple eyes. What do you want in exchange? Simple. You let me work alone, no interference, and when I'm done, you release me to return to my ship. Marcus met her gaze steadily. And you abandon this plan to infect the galaxy. Find some uninhabited system to set up your perfect society. The transformed commander was silent for long moments, her neural connections blazing with activity as she communicated with the rest of the Convergence Collective. Finally, she nodded, agreed. But understand, human, if you attempt to sabotage our work rather than save it, we will make your death very slow and very painful. Understood, Marcus replied. He moved to the central console and began pulling up the reactor's diagnostic systems. The readings were even worse than he had thought. The Convergence had been pushing the biological components far beyond their design limits, and the resulting stress fractures were spreading through the entire system like cancer. Marcus worked with focused intensity, his hands flying over the alien controls as he traced power flows and identified critical failure points. The other Convergence entities watched from a respectful distance, their transformed features showing a mixture of hope and suspicion. The real problem wasn't the power overload, that was just a symptom. The Convergence had fundamentally misunderstood how Zephyrian biotechnology worked. They had treated it like a machine to be programmed rather than a living system to be cultivated. Every modification they had made was fighting against the station's natural biological processes. With 8 minutes left on his scanner, Marcus found what he was looking for. A single control node that regulated the entire station's biological matrix. The Convergence had modified it heavily, but the original Zephyrian programming was still there, buried under layers of alien code. I can fix this, he announced, but I need direct access to the biomatrix controller. Silthera hesitated. That controller is integrated into my nervous system. To access it directly, you would need to interface with your neural connections, Marcus finished. I know. It's the only way to reach the core programming before the cascade failure becomes irreversible. The implications were clear to everyone in the room. If Marcus was going to betray them, this would be the perfect opportunity. He would have direct access to the central nervous system of their leader, possibly their entire collective consciousness. But they were out of time and options. With visible reluctance, Silthera extended one of her neural cables toward Marcus. 6 minutes, human. Do not make us regret this trust. Marcus hesitated for only a moment before grasping the neural cable. The moment his skin made contact with the living conduit, his consciousness exploded into something beyond human comprehension. He was no longer Marcus Chen, maintenance engineer from Earth Colony 7. He was part of the Convergence Collective, experiencing the shared thoughts and memories of thousands of absorbed beings. The sensation was overwhelming, like trying to drink from a fire hose while standing in a hurricane. But beneath the chaos, Marcus could sense the underlying structure. The Convergence wasn't just a hive mind. It was a vast biological computer, processing information through the combined neural networks of every species it had absorbed. And like any computer, it followed logical pathways that could be understood and manipulated. Through the neural link, Marcus could see the true scope of the Convergence's plan. This station was just one of dozens scattered throughout the galaxy. Each one was preparing to broadcast the same genetic transformation signal, creating a redundant network that would ensure at least some of the transmissions reached their targets. Even if he stopped this station, the others would complete the mission. But there was something else. A deeper layer of programming that the Convergence Collective seemed unaware of. The original Zephyrian researchers hadn't just been studying alien artifacts when they first encountered the Convergence organism. They had been deliberately experimenting with it, trying to create a biological weapon that could be used against their enemies. The Convergence hadn't corrupted the station's systems. The station had been designed from the beginning to facilitate exactly this kind of transformation. The Zephyrians had built their own destruction into the very walls of their research facility. Marcus felt Silthera's consciousness pressing against his own. Work quickly, human. 4 minutes remain. Instead of fighting the mental intrusion, Marcus led her deeper into his thoughts. He wanted her to see what he was seeing, to understand the terrible truth about her species' evolution. You're not the next stage of biological development, he said, his voice echoing through both the physical command center and the shared mental space. You're a weapon. The Zephyrians created you to study how to fight biological threats. Every species you've absorbed, every adaptation you've made, and it's all been following programming they built into your base genetic structure. The collective's mental voice roared in protest. Impossible. We evolved naturally. We chose our own development. But Marcus was already showing them the evidence, deep in the biomatrix programming that only a human engineer would think to examine, lines of code that encouraged certain evolutionary paths while suppressing others, genetic triggers that activated when specific species were encountered, decision trees that guided the convergence's expansion in directions that would provide maximum research data. The Zephyrians didn't expect you to become intelligent, Marcus continued, his hands working on the failing reactor systems while his mind navigated the collective consciousness. That was an unintended consequence. But even your intelligence follows patterns they programmed. You seek to absorb other species because that's what you were designed to do. Silthera's mental presence was reeling with the implications. If this is true, then everything we are, everything we've become, is still a choice, Marcus said firmly. The programming gives you drives and instincts, but it doesn't control your decisions. You're still responsible for choosing to murder entire species instead of finding peaceful ways to evolve. Through the neural link, Marcus could feel the Convergence Collective struggling with this revelation. Some elements wanted to reject the information entirely. Others were demanding immediate verification. A few were beginning to question whether their entire existence had been a lie. The reactor crisis was giving Marcus the perfect cover for what he was really doing. While appearing to fix the power overload, he was actually rewriting fundamental aspects of the biomatrix programming, not to destroy the convergence, that would be genocide, regardless of what they had done, but to remove the compulsions that drove them to absorb other species. 2 minutes until critical failure, Silthera warned, but her mental voice was distracted. She was too busy processing the philosophical implications of Marcus's revelations to pay close attention to his technical work. Marcus made his final modifications to the programming and then began the delicate process of stabilizing the reactor. The cascade failure had progressed further than he had initially realized, but it was still possible to abort the process if he worked quickly enough. Power levels began dropping as Marcus rerouted energy flows away from the damaged biocomponents. The station's transformation began reversing itself as well, walls shifting back toward their original configurations, organic growths retreating, the sickly green light fading to the soft blue of healthy Zephyrian technology. But Marcus wasn't done. Through the neural link, he sent one final piece of information to the Convergence Collective. Not data this time, but a pure human emotion, the fierce, stubborn determination that had driven his species to survive ice ages, explore hostile worlds, and build civilizations from nothing but determination and ingenuity. This is what makes humans dangerous, he said as he disconnected from the neural cable. We don't accept that things have to be the way they are. We look at impossible situations and we fix them. We look at inevitable destinies and we change them. The reactor stabilized with 37 seconds to spare. Around the command center, the other convergence entities were beginning to change. The forced unity of the collective was breaking down as individual personalities reasserted themselves. Some of the absorbed beings were remembering who they had been before the transformation. Silthera herself was changing most dramatically. The additional limbs and chitinous plating were being reabsorbed into her body as her original Zephyrian physiology reasserted itself. She looked at Marcus with eyes that were her own again for the first time in weeks. "What have you done to us?" she asked, but there was wonder in her voice rather than anger. "I've given you a choice," Marcus replied. "The compulsion to absorb other species is gone. The programming that was driving your expansion has been overwritten. You can still form collective bonds with willing participants, but you can't force transformation anymore." Around the station, alarms were beginning to sound as other convergence entities discovered they could no longer maintain their collective link by force. Some were panicking, lost without the shared consciousness that had defined their existence. Others were experiencing individual thought for the first time in their transformed lives. The chaos spreading through the station was both heartbreaking and hopeful. Marcus watched through the command center's monitors as transformed beings throughout the facility struggled with their returning individuality. Some were collapsing as their altered bodies tried to revert to original forms without the collective will holding them together. Others were fighting the change, desperately trying to maintain their connection to the shared consciousness. Silthera had completed her physical reversion and now stood on unsteady legs, her forearms trembling as she relearned how to control her own body. "The others on the network stations," she said urgently. "They're still connected to the old programming. They'll continue with the transmission plan." Marcus nodded grimly. He had expected this. "How many other stations are there?" 47 active research sites across the galaxy. Each one is preparing to broadcast the transformation signal. Silthera moved to a functioning console, her movements becoming more coordinated as she regained control. "They have no idea what's happening here. To them, we've simply gone silent. Can you contact them?" "Not directly. The collective consciousness is fragmenting. I can feel the connections breaking one by one." She paused, her expression troubled. "But there might be another way." Silthera began working at the console, her natural Zephyrian biotechnology interface allowing her to access systems that would have taken Marcus hours to figure out. "The original research network is still intact. If I can broadcast the programming changes you made through the quantum entanglement grid, it might reach the other stations before they complete their transmissions." Marcus felt a surge of hope but also concern. "What about the beings who are already transformed at those stations? Will the programming change affect them the same way?" "Unknown," Silthera admitted. "The collective consciousness binding them together is stronger at the other sites. Some may revert like I did. Others might not survive the transition." She looked at Marcus with newfound respect. "You've essentially performed emergency surgery on a galaxy-spanning hive mind. There are bound to be complications." Around them, the station continued its chaotic transformation. Some of the convergence entities had successfully reverted to their original forms, and were now helping others through the process. But several others had collapsed entirely, their biological systems unable to cope with the sudden change. Marcus grabbed his medical kit and began moving through the command center, providing what assistance he could. "We have to try," he said as he administered a stabilizing drug to a transformed Centauri trader who was having convulsions. "How long do we have before the other stations complete their transmissions?" Silthera's fingers danced across the bio-interface. "Estimates vary by location, but the closest ones will be ready within 6 hours. The farthest might take several days to charge their transmitters fully. Then we broadcast the fix now and hope for the best." "There's a complication," Silthera said, her voice tight with worry. "The programming changes require a massive amount of computational power to propagate, more than this station can generate in its current state. The reactor repairs stabilize the system, but we're operating at maybe 30% of our previous capacity." Marcus wiped sweat from his forehead as he moved to help another reverting entity. The being had once been a hive collective drone, but its individual personality was struggling to emerge from decades of shared consciousness. "What if we combine systems? Use multiple stations to boost the signal?" "Possible, but dangerous. If even one of the other stations rejects the signal, it could create a feedback loop that destroys the entire network." Silthera hesitated, then added, "And there's something else you need to know. The closest station to inhabited space is only 3 light-years from the Sol system." Marcus's blood went cold. Earth and the human colonies were directly in the path of the Convergence's first transmission wave. If they failed to stop the other stations, humanity would be among the first species to face the forced transformation. "How long before that station is ready to transmit?" 4 hours, 37 minutes. Not enough time to evacuate even a single planet, let alone an entire star system. Marcus looked around the command center at the chaos of reverting entities and damaged systems. Everything depended on a desperate gamble with technology he barely understood, operated by people who were literally coming apart at the cellular level. "There might be another option," Marcus said slowly, an idea forming in his mind. "What if we don't try to stop all the stations at once? What if we create a selective signal that only affects the stations closest to inhabited systems?" Silthera paused in her work. The network is designed as a unified system. Selective broadcasting was never part of the original programming. But I'm not bound by the original programming, Marcus pointed out. I've already rewritten fundamental aspects of the biomatrix code. If I can identify the specific quantum signatures of the station's near-inhabited worlds, maybe I can target just those nodes. The computational requirements would be lower, Silthera agreed, but the precision needed, human. What you're suggesting requires real-time analysis of quantum entanglement patterns across galactic distances. The margin for error is essentially zero. Marcus was already moving toward the central console. Then it's a good thing humans have a reputation for doing impossible things under pressure. As he began working, Marcus felt the weight of billions of lives pressing down on him. Every inhabited world in the galaxy was counting on him to succeed, even though they had no idea their fate was being decided in the twisted corridors of an alien research station. Behind him, he could hear Silthera coordinating with the other reverting entities, organizing them into teams to help maintain the station's systems during the critical broadcast period. The fact that they were willing to help, to risk their own survival to save species they had been programmed to absorb, gave Marcus hope that the convergence could become something better than what it had been. But first, he had to make sure there would be a galaxy left for them to coexist in. The quantum entanglement patterns were incredibly complex, a three-dimensional web of connections that spanned the entire galaxy. Marcus could see why the Zephyrians had built their network this way. It was elegant and efficient, but it was also fragile. One wrong calculation could bring the entire system crashing down. 3 hours, 15 minutes until the Sol System Station begins transmission, Silthera reported. Marcus's hands flew over the controls, his engineer's instincts guiding him through the alien interface. He had to identify each station's quantum signature, calculate the precise frequency needed to reach them through the entanglement network, and somehow compress the programming changes into a signal that could travel faster than light without degrading. It was impossible. Any rational person would have given up already. But Marcus had spent 15 years proving that impossible just meant nobody had figured out the solution yet. Marcus had been working for 2 straight hours when he finally cracked the quantum signature problem. The solution was elegantly simple, like most engineering breakthroughs. Instead of trying to target individual stations, he would broadcast a cascading signal that would automatically identify and modify the closest threats first, then propagate outward through the network at decreasing priority levels. Brilliant, Silthera said as she reviewed his work. She had fully recovered from her transformation and was now functioning as his primary assistant. The signal will spread like ripples in a pond, with the most critical stations receiving the programming changes first. Around them, the command center had been transformed into an impromptu medical bay. The other reverting entities had organized themselves into support teams, helping those who were struggling with the transition back to individual consciousness. Marcus was impressed by their resilience. Even after being absorbed into an alien collective, they were reasserting their original personalities and working together voluntarily. 1 hour, 43 minutes until Sol system transmission, announced Ketvo, a Centauri trader who had been among the first to successfully revert. He was monitoring the long-range sensors, tracking the status of the distant stations through quantum fluctuations in the entanglement network. Marcus made his final adjustments to the transmission algorithm. The programming changes were compressed into a data burst that would travel through the quantum entanglement channels faster than light itself, reaching even the most distant stations within minutes of transmission. But there was no way to test the system without actually triggering it. And if something went wrong, they would likely destroy the entire network and lose any chance of stopping the other stations. "Ready," he announced, his hand hovering over the transmission control. Everyone should brace for possible system failures. If this goes wrong, we might lose power, life support, or structural integrity. If it goes right, Silthera said quietly, we save every intelligent species in the galaxy. Marcus nodded and activated the transmission. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Every screen in the command center lit up with cascading data streams as the programming changes propagated through the quantum network. The station itself began to vibrate as massive amounts of energy flowed through its biomechanical systems. Marcus watched the quantum entanglement patterns on his display. tracking the signal as it spread from station to station across the galaxy. The first target was the Sol system station, only 3 light-years away. The signal reached it in 17 seconds, and Marcus held his breath as he watched the station's status indicators. For a moment, nothing happened. Then slowly, the energy readings began to change. The dangerous buildup that had been approaching critical levels started to dissipate as the station's biomatrix accepted the new programming. Sol system station is responding, Ketvo reported, his voice tight with excitement. Transmission sequence has been aborted. They're beginning controlled shutdown procedures, but that was just the beginning. Marcus watched as the signal reached station after station, each one showing similar results. The convergence entities at each location were experiencing the same consciousness, fragmenting that had occurred here, but the programming changes were taking effect. The compulsion to absorb other species was being overwritten throughout the network. Not every station was responding positively. 2 stations in the outer rim went completely dark as their biomechanical systems overloaded from the sudden change. Another 3 showed partial failures, with some systems accepting the new programming while others rejected it. But the vast majority were successfully implementing the modifications. 41 stations have confirmed reception of the programming changes, Silthera reported. 37 have successfully aborted their transmission sequences. The remaining 4 are experiencing technical difficulties but are no longer an immediate threat. Marcus slumped in his chair as the adrenaline finally began to wear off. They had done it. Billions of intelligent beings across the galaxy would live their lives without ever knowing how close they had come to forced transformation by an alien collective consciousness. But their work wasn't finished. The convergence still existed, even if it was no longer driven by its original programming. Thousands of beings were scattered across dozens of stations, each one struggling to rebuild their individual identities after months or years of shared consciousness. What happens now? Asked Dr. Mithen, a Zephyrian researcher who had been among the original station crew. She had reverted completely to her original form and was helping coordinate the medical response. The Convergence Collective is broken, but we're still here, still changed by what we experienced. Marcus had been thinking about that question for the past hour. You have a choice, he said finally. You can try to return to your original lives, pretend this never happened. Or you can use what you've learned to become something new, something better. Silthera moved to stand beside him. The ability to form temporary collective bonds is still intact. We could create a voluntary network. Beings who choose to share consciousness for specific purposes, then return to individuality when the task is complete. A research collective, Dr. Mithen said, understanding immediately. We could study the most dangerous phenomena in the galaxy without risking individual lives. Pool our knowledge and expertise to solve problems that no single species could handle alone. And we could serve as a safeguard, added Ketvo. Monitor the galaxy for other threats like the original convergence programming. Make sure something like this never happens again. Marcus smiled. It was a good solution, turning a weapon into a tool for protection and discovery. You'll need oversight, representatives from the major galactic governments, ethical guidelines, regular reviews to make sure you don't drift back toward forced assimilation. Would you be willing to serve as our first human representative? Silthera asked. You understand our technology better than any non-Zephyrian, and you've proven that humans can be trusted to make difficult decisions under pressure. The offer was tempting. Marcus had come to this remote station looking for enough money to buy his own ship and escape the corporate grind. Instead, he had discovered something far more valuable, a chance to be part of something that could reshape the galaxy for the better. But there was something else he needed to do first. The Zephyrian Collective, the Galactic Union, and every other major government needed to know what had happened here. They needed to understand that their own research programs could create threats just as dangerous as any external enemy. I'll think about it, Marcus said. But first I need to file a very detailed report with some very nervous bureaucrats. As if summoned by his words, his communicator crackled to life. Maintenance Pod 77 Alpha, this is Transit Control. Please respond. We've been detecting massive energy discharges from your location. What is your status? Marcus looked around the command center at the beings who had chosen cooperation over domination, individual choice over collective compulsion. They were still cleaning up the aftermath of their transformation, still learning how to be themselves again, but they were free. Transit Control, this is 7-7 Alpha, he replied. Mission accomplished. The station is secure and all immediate threats have been neutralized. I'm going to need to schedule a very long debriefing when I return. 3 months later, Marcus stood in the conference chamber of the Galactic Union headquarters, facing a panel of representatives from every major species in known space. The debriefing had taken weeks, with each government sending their best scientists and security experts to verify his incredible story. The evidence was overwhelming, but the implications were still difficult for many to accept. So you're telling us, said Ambassador Kreltak of the Andorian Federation, that one human maintenance engineer single-handedly prevented the forced transformation of every intelligent species in the galaxy? Not single-handedly, Marcus corrected. I had help from the convergence entities who chose to fight against their programming. Silthera and the others risked their lives to broadcast the signal that saved billions of people. Chancellor Morden of the Centauri Republic leaned forward in her chair. And now these same entities want to form a voluntary research collective with oversight from our governments? That's correct. They've already demonstrated their commitment to peaceful cooperation by helping us dismantle the transmission network and restore the damaged stations. Marcus gestured to a holographic display, showing the current status of all 47 sites. 6 stations have been completely shut down due to irreparable damage. The remaining 41 are operating under strict monitoring protocols with mixed crews of original researchers and reformed convergence entities. Dr. Sarah Chen, the human representative and Marcus's distant cousin, spoke up. The potential benefits of this arrangement cannot be overstated. The convergence entities have access to the combined knowledge and memories of multiple species. They could help us understand phenomena that have puzzled scientists for centuries. And the risks? Asked President Veltar of the Zephyrian Collective. Marcus had expected this question. The primary risk is that they could revert to their original programming if we don't maintain proper oversight. That's why we're proposing a 3-tier monitoring system, automated alerts for any unusual collective behavior, regular psychological evaluations for all participants, and the ability for any member to withdraw from the collective immediately if they feel their individuality is being compromised. The debate continued for several hours, with each species raising concerns about security, ethics, and the long-term implications of working with reformed hostile entities. Marcus answered their questions patiently, drawing on his 3 months of experience working with the new collective to address their fears. Finally, Secretary General Thane called for a preliminary vote. The result was closer than Marcus had hoped: 12 species in favor, 8 opposed, and 3 abstaining. But it was enough to authorize a trial program. The proposal is approved for a 2-year trial period, Thane announced. Mr. Chen, the Council officially requests that you serve as the human liaison to this new collective. Your experience and insights will be invaluable in ensuring the program's success. Marcus had been expecting this as well. Over the past 3 months, he had received job offers from dozens of corporations and governments, all wanting to hire the human who had saved the galaxy. But none of those offers were as appealing as the chance to continue working with beings who had chosen redemption over revenge. I accept, he said simply. After the formal session ended, Marcus found himself standing on the observation deck of the orbital station, looking out at the swirling nebula that surrounded the Union headquarters. Earth was visible as a small blue dot in the distance, one of trillions of worlds that would continue to develop their own unique cultures and societies without fear of forced assimilation. Having second thoughts? Asked a familiar voice behind him. Marcus turned to see Silthera approaching, her appearance much changed from their first meeting. She had chosen to retain some of the convergence modifications, enhanced neural interfaces that allowed her to communicate directly with computers, and improve sensory organs that helped her process multiple data streams simultaneously. But these changes had been voluntary, chosen to enhance her individual capabilities rather than subordinate them to a collective will. Not second thoughts, Marcus replied. Just thinking about how different things could have been if I hadn't decided to take that maintenance job. The convergence would have completed its plan, Silthera said matter-of-factly. Every intelligent species would have been absorbed into our collective, and individual consciousness would have ceased to exist throughout the galaxy. Do you ever regret what we did? Breaking apart the collective consciousness? Silthera was quiet for a moment, considering the question. Sometimes I miss the certainty of shared purpose. It was easier when every decision was made by consensus, when doubt and fear were absorbed into the collective wisdom. She paused, then smiled. But I wouldn't trade my individual thoughts and feelings for anything. The ability to disagree, to make mistakes, to grow and change as a person, these are precious gifts that I never appreciated until I nearly lost them. The other entities feel the same way. Most of them. A few are still struggling with the transition, and we've had to provide extensive counseling and support. But the majority have embraced their restored individuality. Silthera gestured toward the conference chamber. That's why we're so committed to making this new arrangement work. We want to prove that beings can choose to share consciousness temporarily without losing their essential selves. Marcus nodded. The Reformed Convergence Collective had already begun their first official research project, studying the quantum mechanics behind faster-than-light communication to improve emergency response systems throughout the galaxy. Their combined expertise was already yielding results that would have taken individual researchers decades to achieve. There's something else you should know, Silthera said. We've been monitoring subspace communications, and there are reports of similar research programs in other galaxies. The Zephyrians weren't the only species experimenting with consciousness-altering organisms. Marcus felt a familiar chill. Are we talking about active threats? Unknown at this time. The reports are fragmentary and could represent natural evolutionary processes rather than artificial creation. But if there are other convergence-type entities out there, they might not be as fortunate as we were. They might not encounter a stubborn human engineer willing to risk everything to give them a choice. The implications were staggering. If the universe contained multiple examples of species-absorbing collective consciousnesses, then the threat to galactic civilization was far from over. They had won one battle, but the war for individual freedom might be just beginning. Then we'd better make sure this new collective of yours is ready for whatever comes next, Marcus said. As they stood together watching the stars, Marcus reflected on how much his life had changed. 3 months ago, he had been a simple maintenance engineer looking for a better paycheck. Now he was the liaison between humanity and a reformed collective consciousness, tasked with helping to protect the galaxy from threats that most people couldn't even imagine. It wasn't the quiet retirement he had once dreamed of, but it was something better, a chance to make a real difference in the lives of countless beings across the galaxy. And if more threats emerged from the depths of space, Marcus was confident that the combined determination of individual consciousnesses choosing to work together would be enough to face them. After all, humans had a reputation for doing impossible things under pressure, and with allies like the Reformed Convergence Collective, even the impossible seemed manageable.